Okay, I'd like to bring Red Smith up here. Red's going to talk a little bit about CARB and some other things. Of course, I'm not really sure what he's going to talk about. I even had a microphone here ready for you, buddy. You got one back there?
Yeah, I got handed one.
Have a seat. We haven't been on the stage
something
together for a long time, buddy. Huh? Red and I went and did a lot of town halls. We did two, and remember we did the one in Roseville and in Lincoln? Yeah, we did a lot of them. The best one we did was El Dorado when we hadn't slept.
Yeah, I think El Dorado was by far our best one. It was a lot of fun.
Anyway, buddy, can you tell us a little bit, just give us a little background on CARB for starters, or do you want to take this to another direction?
Well, I would like to ask everybody one question first. How many people here believe that what the enemy is doing, they only do it on Monday night while we're sitting here paying attention? We have to be paying attention and working at it every day. It's not a lot of fun. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of the pleasure out of the things that you'd rather be doing, but it has to be done. CARB, good example. We've gone through 2 evidentiary hearings with CARB now, and when we got into this thing, I think we were kind of thinking that we were going to push back on a regulatory agency that had gotten a little bit too big for its britches. That sound about right, Sally? Yep. They are so much more than that. At the end of the day, these guys are a multinational, global criminal conglomerate. They are everywhere. And the things that they're doing, they've violated international treaty on some of the things. So I guess we'll just kind of back up and start from the beginning with CARB, where they first broke the rules. And they first break the rules by saying that they are not subject to coordination. Now, there are several criteria that an agency has to meet to be subject to coordination. And what coordination means is that the agency that is creating and enforcing the regulations will sit down with the local government and negotiate a way to come into compliance with those regulations that does not harm the local entity, whether that's the city or the county or whatever it happens to be that they're dealing with. It has to come into compliance with the local policy, not the local policy coming into compliance with the agency's regulations. So unless you can find a county who has a policy that we want to destroy our economy and put everybody on welfare, CARB is not following coordination. We've listened to testimony from different county supervisors, Del Norte, Modoc, Shasta County supervisors that have said they've never approached us for coordination as they're required to do. We've listened to several cities, Redding, Shasta Lake City, Anderson, Vacaville, Fairfield, Sassoon City, Dixon, Woodland. The list goes on and on. They have not coordinated. Now, CARB says that they don't have to coordinate because they are not a federal agency. Well, they are carrying out a major federal action because they are operating off of the Clean Air Act. That's one of the criteria that coordinates it. Another one that kicks off coordination is the fact that they're receiving federal funds. Now, the city of Redding, when they issued their letter to CARB and said, we're demanding coordination, CARB came back and said, we don't have to coordinate with you because we are not committing a major federal action. Now, about 3 weeks ago in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, CARB was being sued for violating interstate commerce law because they were creating a separate set of taxation and tariff for the state of California that didn't exist anywhere else. Now, that case was dismissed, but the case was dismissed because CARB said we are an entity of the EPA and we are committing a major federal action. So these guys are really playing hokey pokey with this thing. They got, 1 minute we're this, 1 minute we're not. So these are the first very basic violations of law that we knew about before we started digging. Now we get digging into Freedom of Information Act and other things, trying to find out exactly what's going on with CARB, because our own Congress has subpoenaed CARB 7 times to get their hands on the scientific data that says diesel particulate matter is a cause of premature death. 7 times our own Congress has been denied by CARB. They won't cough up the information. Okay, now there's this little thing called the Data Quality Control Act. that states that any information to be deemed valid must be open, transparent, available, and easily reproducible by an independent third party. Okay, CARB has violated that because they will not disclose the science. Now it states right in the Data Quality Control Act, any data that does not meet that criteria is to be deemed fraudulent. So everything CARB is basing what they're doing is federally deemed fraudulent. Not only that, they have gone before Congress and procured federal funds with fraudulent data. That's chargeable with up to 10 years in a federal prison. It gets better. So we're still at the tip of the iceberg, and we're discovering these things as we go through all of this. Okay, now through this Freedom of Information Act, some guys back east discovered that CARB has been doing human testing on people. At the same time that they are testifying before Congress that there is zero safe level of exposure for diesel particulates, that it is absolutely 100% the cause of premature death, these guys are exposing children as young as the age of 10 to 60 times normal the amount of exposure. They're taking kids and sitting them down in universities and running hoses into their nose and directly pumping in so that they can ingest diesel particulate matter. That's 60 times normal. They're taking groups of asthmatics, putting them on exercise equipment, and then pumping diesel exhaust fumes into the room to see if they can cause a reaction. Because they know their science doesn't hold up. They took one gal at the University of North Carolina that they knew had a heart defibrillator or a heart defibrillation, and tested her and ran her through the whole sequence, went back and tested her, said, oh, look, she's still got a heart palpitation. Guess what? That's caused by diesel particulate matter. Now, the problem with this is at the end of World War II, about 1945, when the truth started to come out about the Nazis and the medical tests that they had done and the different things that they had done, the world got together and said, never again. This shall never happen again. And they established what was known as the Nuremberg Code. Well, the California Air Resources Board and 10 universities in the United States of America and 6 universities abroad, and the EPA funding them with your money, has violated that. Because one of the things that the Nuremberg Code, which is also known as the general rule in California because they've adopted it for medical testing, is that if there is any level of danger that any form of testing will cause, you don't do it. You're not even allowed legally to ask, especially when it comes to children. And then we get looking into what's the word I'm looking for, when they tell you what you're doing to you in your test, the disclosure.
Oh, disclosure.
Yeah. So we get looking at the disclosure. Yeah. There is the consent forms, thank you. At the consent forms, there is no mention of long-term harm. There's no words like cancer. There's no words like asthma, small diesel particulate matter, acute cause of death, cancer causing, none of that. They didn't even disclose to these people what they were doing to them. So CARB is in this unique conundrum of, okay, is your science complete BS and you conducted these tests because you knew you weren't going to hurt anybody and you've been lying the whole time, or are you psychotic Nazis that are trying to kill people to prove your science? Well, okay, here's the thing, and we get it. So now we know that they've violated international health law, okay? And then we're listening to more testimony and we get into this, and then we find out exactly how much diesel particulate matter that we're talking about, okay? We're talking about 0.25 microns per million liter part. Okay, now what that means is if you take all of that diesel particulate matter and add it up, all your normal amount of exposure over an 80-year lifespan, you would be absorbing 0.004% of a teaspoon. That's the equivalent of smoking 5 cigarettes over 80 years of life. That's what all these regulations are based on. That kills you.
Do you think that they're using environmental regulation for extortion?
They absolutely are. Because look at what they have done with this science, with this faulty science and these lies, these outright lies. The amount of money that has gone into the filtration systems for the trucks. And one that we're working on now is one of the very early filter companies that was making trucks for these filters. Just so happens the California State Assemblywoman that helped push AB 32, her husband owned the company that made the filters, but the filters have now been found faulty, so the company's closed shop and gone away, so you can't do anything about it.
Isn't that the reason the Highway Patrol's so upset because they're not DOT?
Well, the Highway Patrol is. We actually heard testimony from a former Highway Patrol officer. None of these filters have been safety inspected. They are not DOT approved. He testified that they could be causing up to 5 fires a week on trucks and buses. So again, CARB has violated the law for health and public safety because they have not tested these things that they're mandating. They are exposing school children to possibly burning up with these things. And the list goes on and on and on. And then you get into the fact that they have no regulatory or police authority to carry out any of these actions. And then we hear a story of a guy that pulls into a scale and CARB goes to inspect his truck. And he tells CARB, you can't inspect my truck. You have no authority to do this. So CARB gets the CHP to crack open the hood, and the CHP starts conducting their test, and the CARB guy goes ahead and hops up on there and starts writing this guy tickets. So the guy says, show me the law, show me the regulation, show me anything that I have violated and where you have authority to charge me anything. CARB guy can't do it, so this guy figures it's going away. Well, CARB gets a hold of him and says, you owe us this money for the fines, pay us now or we're going to make these retroactive back to January 1st. Guy says, you don't have any authority to charge me for this. They put a tax lien on his property.
You see, I think we've gotten to a point where they will do what they want to do because we let them. So at what point do we say, okay, we want to play by the rules, which we are, and we want to obey the law, and we do, but at what point do we say, but we're not going to let you have 5 aces and take the pot, because there has to be some sort of consequences to you not following the law. And I think that's the thing here. Now, it seems to me that we have so many things that happen. Is there, Red, do you think that there's maybe I like to call it trickle-down tyranny? Do you think that
absolutely?
Do you think that there's anything happening that trickles down to a little closer to, say, River City?
Yeah, give me a little bit and I'm going to bring this right home. Okay, so now we've got all of these different things going on, and how many people are familiar with cap and trade? Okay, I'll be real quick then, make sure everybody understands it. They've decided that fuel producers and fuel refineries create too much carbon. They have to mitigate that by buying clean air. Nobody has explained to me how buying clean air in somewhere like Quebec stops pollution in the Central Valley. That's a whole nother discussion. So we've got cap and trade going on. It's raising the prices of our gasoline about 81 cents a gallon right now. Okay. Now, how you buy carbon credits is there is an open world market for carbon credits. You log on to this one company's website and you bid on carbon credits for clean air in places like Quebec under the Montreal Protocol that happened to be set up by these guys called the World Bank. You go to places like the Nepal Water Project and buy the carbon credit that's generated by the Nepal Water Project that happens to be headed up by McConnell Foundation out of Redding, California.
Wow.
You go to Nepal.
Can you say that again?
Well, McConnell is one of the largest carbon credit sellers in Shasta County.
No.
They are. And it's on a water project that they're doing in Nepal, or in Kenya. They have another one in Nepal. So you have all of this huge auction that's going on for all of these carbon credits where you can buy clean air. But in places like Lake County, that is considered the second cleanest air in the country, you can't generate any carbon credits out of Lake County that has clean air because their population's considered unhealthy. And their population is considered unhealthy because there's too many people in poverty because regulations like CARB put them all out of work.